Good afternoon. Welcome to Tom Matthews with the Tom and Joanne team. And today I'm doing a video on what is my home worth. You know, it is January 24th, 2019, and in Massachusetts we are primarily on a spring market cycle where properties want to come on the market anytime from mid-February through mid-April is like the prime time for getting your home listed to sell. And people are constantly asking Joanne and I, what's my home worth? How's the market? You know, and the market is a different discussion from what my home is worth. So today's video, I'm going to focus on what's my home worth? How do you determine the value of my property? And it is a confluence of a bunch of activities. It takes a lot of time to come up with the value of a property. But the most important things that we kind of go through is the first thing you want to do is tour the property, see what upgrades have been made to the home, and also look at the features, bedrooms, bathrooms. So this is like the basic analysis to look at. And then what we do is we go out and we look at Zillow. We look at Redfin. We want to know what the popular sites that the consumers are looking at, what they're valuing your home at. And typically those sites are aggregating data based on price per square foot or square footage of your home and lot size. And then just strictly on features, not taking into consideration style of home, age of home. You know, because in some markets in our region, an antique property will have more value than maybe a 1980s colonial. And so you want to kind of understand what's important for the buyer pool. And then what we do is I always like to do a comparative market analysis through the multiple listing service, where I am allowed to pick out the comps, the comparable properties, to kind of see what the computer will kick out for a value. And then something that Joanne and I developed, and it was something that we learned from a gentleman down in Cape Cod named Jack Cotton. He is like a specialist in selling luxury real estate. So we learned this from him and another guy in our company named George Ballantyne. And both of them came up and shared that you can come up with what's called a sales matrix, where you can download data from the multiple listing that you can put into an Excel spreadsheet and pull out data points to be able to give sellers concrete data to look at. And, you know, that process is time consuming, but we are in a market right now that is shifting. We are definitely transitioning. Joanne and I just pulled a report of all the homes in Massachusetts that sold in 2018. And probably the most interesting statistic that came out was that the original list price that a home came on the market for, there was a significant gap between that number and the list price the home was at when an offer came in. And we know from our 17 years of experience, if you add us up and couple it together, we have almost 30 years of experience, that when you combine that much experience and you look at the market, when you start to see a gap between the original list price and the sales price, that is an indicator that the market is shifting. Because in prior markets from 14, 15, 16, 17, you could never outpace the real estate market. So if you priced it high, the market would just come up to that price and there would be no delta. But now we're seeing that you can, in fact, overprice your property. So now is a good time to start implementing that precision pricing method. And basically what that is it's diving deep into the marketplace to understand what the value is. And probably one of the most important things when looking at values of property is, number one, you got to look at multiple sites. No home has a number. I mean, eventually there will be a number that we have to select to put the property into the multiple listing service, but that's going to be a strategic position we make. But for coming up with a value, your realtor should always come up with a range. And depending on how much the house is worth, the range may be $10,000, the range may be $200,000, depending upon what price bracket your house comes in, but there is a range. And so you get the range by looking at a bunch of different data points. And then the realtor will use their experience in the field, in the community, to assign value to some things that maybe aren't so black and white. So black and white is 4 beds, 2.5 baths, 2-car garage. What's not so black and white is, do you have Corian countertops, do you have Formica countertops, do you have granite countertops, and what is the value assigned to each of those features? And that's kind of where the experience of a seasoned broker comes into play with helping you, because getting where we've been in a market where you could have multiple bids, we're now in a market where you still can get multiple bids. And I think spring 2019, we're going to still see a lot of buyer activity, but maybe the buyers will only push your house 3 or 4% above your asking price. So making sure that you are properly priced is important, because if you went too low and they're only pushing it 3 or 4%, but you were hoping for 10 or 15%, and you priced too low, you could leave money on the table. And the biggest fear that homeowners have, particularly sellers, is that they don't want to leave money on the table. Traditionally, prior to the market climate that we've been in for like the last 5 years, sellers would always price their houses high and come down because they didn't want to miss out on leaving equity on the table. But the market we've been in, the media frenzy coming out of the city has been multiple bids. Buyers expect to pay the seller's asking price or over. And so that's where it gets a little tricky as far as how to come up with the right price and understand how to do it. So, one of the most important things for sellers, if you are thinking about selling, definitely bring in a seasoned professional. Bring in 2 brokers. Joanne and I primarily work in Concord and the surrounding towns. So Acton, Lincoln, Wayland, Sudbury. And we just come in and we sit down and we have a conversation. And the most important piece of the conversation is your risk tolerance. What is your risk tolerance for getting the price wrong? Because if you have to carry that property for 90, 180 days, 365 days, depending upon the price point, are you okay with that? And if the answer is yes, then that gives you the flexibility to be able to position the property differently. So it's important to have that active conversation. I just sat with a consumer, has a home in Acton, and they said to me, we need to accelerate time. And I said, the only way to accelerate time is with money. You'll have to position the property at a different price point. And they said, that's fine. And you have to just understand that everyone's situation is different. So I could have 3 houses, in Massachusetts, Hardwood houses, let's say 3 condos, all exactly the same, all worth the same amount of money, but depending upon the seller's situation, we may position it differently and get different outcomes. And so, as you're trying to figure out what your house is worth, definitely look at the internet sites. They're good, they're relevant. Look at your assessed value. And, and if you want to get a real concrete value because you want to sell your home, bring in a professional like myself. Bring in a good realtor that you trust. Let them come in and give you a comprehensive market report so that you can determine the value of your property. And make sure you're looking at what is the assessed value correlation in my community and in the surrounding. I like to say hyper-focused and local on houses. So no matter what community you're in, so we're doing another market analysis in Concord, and Concord has, a bunch of different neighborhoods. So when you're looking at a home, you want to look at that home and you want to check for relevant sales and activity within, a 1/4 mile to a 3/4 mile radius around the property. And if you don't find anything within a 3 to 6 month time frame, maybe go back a little bit more in time rather than going to different parts of the town to make sure that you're pulling relevant data for the home. And then you come up with a range of what the home is worth. And our job as realtors is to look at a past buyer's behavior and try to predict a future buyer's reaction. So we're going to put this house on the market, and based on what's happened in the last 3 to 6 months, we're going to try and predict what another buyer might do when the property comes out to them. And that's our job. So that's kind of the process that goes into pricing properties and what's my home worth. Your home is worth what a willing and able buyer in an open and free market will pay for your property. And in order to get to that price point, I recommend bringing in a great realtor. And I'm Tom Matthews of the Tom and Joanne team, and thank you very much for watching my live video today. Cheers.